The other thing I was going to say too, Chell, is that if you want to send me the invite link, to the email that
Oh,
I
yeah.
emailed, and then I'll just text that to Jamar, and then he can just make sure to
Yeah,
forward
yeah,
out,
yeah.
just make sure it's the same one or whatever.
True. While we're on the show, if he call, that's my phone number. Me and Gabe always text during the show.
Oh, okay, cool. And what's the email I should send that to?
Jamar, Jamar.
Oh, for the.
Link.
Oh, that. Okay, all right, cool.
You can send it to me.
If you're tuning in, make sure to hit that share button, hit that like button. We're going to get going here in just a few moments. We need y'all to share this great episode we have coming up.
7-8.
Show is all yours, gentlemen.
Welcome to Black Republican, Black Democrat. This week I'll be your co-host, Jamar.
And I'm your other co-host, AK Kamar. What up, bro?
Welcome, homie. What's going down?
Last weekend, Saturday, had my niece's graduation party. So we had a bunch of folks over. That was good. Again, congratulations to my niece, Mimi. You made it.
Word.
And I thought I'd just be funny. And so on her cake, because my wife and I, we threw everything. And on the cake, I was trying to think of something funny to put on it. And so I put straight out of Tartan because she graduated from
Okay, Tartan High School.
But
Okay.
instead of straight out of Compton, I thought it was hilarious.
No, it was that. Listen, that was.
I thought it was funny. But then on Sunday, the wife and I celebrated our 18-year wedding anniversary.
So
man.
I seen. I've been married for. I was married for 18 years, so I know.
Oh, you made it to 18?
I know the bliss.
Okay.
I do
All
know the
right.
bliss of being married for 18 years.
Yeah.
No longer, but we don't want to talk about my personal life right now.
How was your weekend, bro?
My weekend was, it was cool though. I mean, I tried to relax a little bit this weekend, and I did on Saturday. I slept a lot on Saturday, but I can't complain. Shit,
Just living life
that's it.
one day at a time. Well, thank you for tuning in. If you already haven't hit that like button and share button, please do that. Throughout the show, if you haven't watched this before, if you put in your comments, we're going to throw certain ones up on the screen. If you got questions for our guest or for anything that we're talking about, you can throw that up there. If you do like what it is that we do, if you like the idea of helping us keep political discourse alive, please visit our link tree. That's linkttree/BRBD. It's kind of the one-stop shop so you can get connected with all of our social medias. I'm on TikTok, do a lot of stuff there, just on my personal account, AK Kamara. Also, most importantly, is it will give you a chance to actually become a subscriber to the show. By becoming a subscriber, 100% of your subscription goes to produce a show. And what our real hope is that we get enough subscribers that we can actually produce multiple shows per week instead of just, one every Wednesday. So think about becoming a subscriber, whether you're at the $300 level or you're at the $25 level. And then also, again, make sure to hit that Patreon link that's in our link tree. It's going to bring you to our subscription. You kind of break it all down. Also want to be able to thank some of our sponsors. You know, that's really how we do make sure that we get things going until we get enough subscribers. But please visit our sponsors. The biggest one that we've had for, you know, now going on a month, brand new to the show, and he's a guy that's been on the show before.
Yes.
He's a guy that is a friend of the show. He understands what the concept of the show is, and he really does believe in our mission to help keep, you know, really civility, or bring it back, I should say, to political conversations left and right, you know, progressive Democrat, whether you're moderate or you're right winger like me. And that's Dennis Smith. Now, Dennis Smith, he has a law office, and he helps really with end of life issues. So whether you need help with a will, you need help with a healthcare directive, setting up a trust, these are things that Dennis will help you with. He also does help do some small business consultation. So make sure to give him a call, 612-889-3971, or shoot him an email, dennis@smithlawmn.com, and he'll be able to get you on the right track.
Word.
Now, after that,
You know, if you want something to drink and you need some postage and some Polar sausages, maybe.
are they considered a bodega?
Yeah, and you know what? He does have a smoking
Or are they
bodega.
a bodega.
You know what? It depends who you are. You tomato or tomato. You know, but he does have a smoking bodega, a smoker's bodega.
So where are you going to go?
The Weber Mart.
The what?
The Weber Mart.
Yes, please do check out the Weber Mart. Kevin, he's been a sponsor of the show for like the last year and a half.
2 years.
2 years.
Yeah.
2 years. I'm shortchanging the man. But please do visit his store, his location, and patronize his business.
Absolutely. No doubt about it. You know what? Look, usually we want to change things a little bit tonight. You know, usually we start off with our topics, you know what I'm saying? But tonight we got a great guest. So let's open up the show with our great guest, and then we'll, of course, later on we get to talk some topics. But tonight's guest is former police chief of St. Paul, and I might as well say a friend of the show, because it's like he lives it. It's like his fourth appearance on the show. Welcome to former St. Paul Police Chief Todd Axtell. How are you, Chief?
Thank you very much. It's great to see both of you tonight. It's a good night. Enjoy listening to you guys. You have some compelling arguments on both sides there, and some great conversations. So I hope you can hear me okay.
No, we hear you just fine. I appreciate that. And he's saying that we didn't even slip him a 20. We didn't. He's just saying that. He's just saying that, Chief. Like, so we're gonna be kind of your time tonight, and appreciate you coming on. So we'll get just right to it. You've retired. I said former St. Paul Police Chief. You've retired. What, about a month ago now already? Has it been a month?
It's been a little over a month.
A little over a month. Why did you retire? Were you tired of the grit and grind of being the chief, or all the shenanigans that come with it? Why did you retire?
Well, you know, I've been a police officer in this state for 34 years.
Wow.
And a St. Paul police officer for 33 years.
Damn.
In the last 6 years on the force was serving my 6-year term in St. Paul as police chief. So it's been a wonderful, wonderful opportunity, such a rewarding career that I've had, and it was just time to move on and do other things. And I'm really happy with the fact that I've started up a consulting company now, where I'm helping other cities, states, counties, private businesses help with safety and security issues. So it's an exciting time for me.
Right up your alley, right?
That's very cool. You know, I got a question about decorum. So when you retire as a chief of police, right? Because that was would that be your rank when you retired? Do you still want people to call you Chief Axtell?
Well, you know, the name's Todd, of course, but you know, it's a bit of an endearing term. You know, once a chief, always a chief. I always refer to, whether it's Chief Finney, Chief Harrington, Chief Smith, they're all chief to me. And so when someone calls you chief after you've been a chief, it is a high level. It's a compliment to hear that term.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to stick with that, because I have a lot of respect for you. I've always been fascinated with law enforcement, and on this show we have a lot of very serious conversations talking about how law enforcement interactions do affect, you know, Black community, Hispanic community, white community. We've had Jai Hansen. He's been on the show a bunch of times as a Bloomington police officer running for Hennepin County Sheriff. You know, we've had
Mary Ordy.
Yeah. We've just had a lot of law enforcement. And the thing that I was so excited when I heard that you wanted to come back on the show, since I've joined as a co-host, is I really wanted to be able to kind of have some conversations with you, now that you're not in that role, about maybe some things that you feel comfortable talking about in regards to like the political atmosphere, because we're a political show, right? Black Republican, Black Democrat, and I've always been curious, so I want to kind of jump into the meat of it. As a chief, how do you kind of separate yourself from the world of politics? Because you have a job to do to not only keep the citizens of St. Paul safe, but make sure that your officers are safe. But there's a lot of political machinations, right? Because you're the second largest city in Minnesota. So for you, how did you separate kind of the political side from, your actual job?
Yeah, that's a great question. We're very fortunate in St. Paul to have what we call a term of office under the city charter. So it's a 6-year term of office, and the founders, some of the early founders of the city, came up with the charter to help protect and keep politics out of the police department. And I really think other cities across the country should adopt this model, where you can't remove a chief of police in St. Paul once they're a term chief unless you have cause, which is a significant violation of ethics or conduct, et cetera. And then you need 5 out of the 7 council members to agree, and the mayor to agree, a supermajority of the council. So it's never happened. And so I've been very fortunate to work in an environment, although I had to survive politics to be the capital city's police chief. I tried to keep politics out of policing. I tried to keep politics away from the women and men of the St. Paul Police Department so they could do their job without worrying about political whims, political lenses, political issues that should not have a place in policing, as long as we are providing trusted service with respect and leading with the heart and the heart of a guardian as a police officer.
So you said right now you're consulting, so that's what's next for you. But are you involved in the choosing? I know it's probably Mayor Carter's job, but are you involved in any way of choosing the next chief? And do you believe he or she should come from the ranks of from the St. Paul Police Department? And then I'll ask you another question.
Yeah, thank you. No, I'm not involved in the process. Certainly, I live in the city of St. Paul. I'm going to continue to live here. So I'm involved as a resident now, and not as a St. Paul police chief. But yes, I really believe that there's a reason the St. Paul Police Department has a different feel from other police departments across the country. When you think about the St. Paul Police Department, we've had several years now of the last few years of record low civil liability payouts, high levels of trust with the community, some very intense policy discussions and policy revisions with use of force, with community input, et cetera. The reason I believe there's a different feel in our department compared to others is because we have always hired our own who have come up through the ranks of the St. Paul Police Department and who have been brought up in the unique culture of the St. Paul Police Department. So I really believe, now I'm speaking as a resident of the city and somebody who has served for 33 years in St. Paul, that we're best served hiring somebody from within the organization. And we've worked very hard over the last 6 years to make sure we have several people who are ready to go.
So, okay, well, I guess my pushback with that, Chief, is if you have a city that's not happy with the way it's being policed and they think that there's not enough reflectiveness, that's not a word, but there's not enough reflection in the police department as the city. So then how do you go about that? Then why is it then cool to promote someone from within if we're complaining that there's not enough women, there's not enough black or brown officers? Is that, or the police misconduct? So should we really be promoting from within if we're having these different issues?
Yeah, so usually you promote from outside the organization when you need somebody to come in and change a broken organization, right? The facts will tell you that over the last 3 years, in 2019, there was $24,000 in police misconduct payouts through the city attorney's office. 2020, that was $5,000, which was a record low.
Wow.
In 2021, it was $70,000. So 3 years, and $99,000 in civil liability payouts with over 1 million calls for service during those 3 years.
It's pretty damn
with
good.
600 police officers. So the facts will tell you, in addition to that, over those 6 years, we increased diversity in our department by 41%. 41%. That's the fact. So we have come a long way. We're continuing to move in that direction, and we have people in this organization who have the recipe to continue that momentum and believe in it. So why in the world would you go outside the organization when you're having these results right now and people trained up within the ranks ready to go?
Did you I'm sorry, bro. Did you tell Melvin Carter that? Did you echo those sentiments to the Melvin Carter?
I did.
Okay.
No, absolutely. And I have echoed that sentiment to the community as well. Now, ultimately, it's up to the mayor, and he is the CEO of the city of St. Paul. He will choose who he's going to choose. But I have a voice in this community, and I'm going to use that voice to tell people what I truly believe in my heart.
Okay, two questions. One is, if he picks someone outside of the force, will you publicly discuss, talk about your dislike or like for that person or that choice? And then secondly, over the 2 years that Minneapolis went through its, huge loss of police officers, did St. Paul get affected as well? I heard you say 600 officers, so it sound like you didn't. But did St. Paul lose any officers within the 2 years that Minneapolis did? Or last 3 years anyway?
Yes, we did.
You did?
Yes, we lost a significant number of officers during those years. We had an academy last fall. That academy is now out of field training and working the street on solo patrol. So, we have suffered great losses, but not to the extent that Minneapolis has.
One of the things,
and the question about the person, if the mayor decides to hire somebody from the outside, what would I do? I think was one of your questions.
Yep.
I would open that woman or man with open arms and do everything I could as a resident and as the ex-St. Paul police chief to help them succeed, unquestionably, without a doubt.
Word, I appreciate it. Man, you are such a stand-up damn dude. Goodness.
So,
I just speak the truth.
That's word.
My wife's mother, she worked in property evidence for the city of St. Paul for 15 years. Curly, short, medium, long hair, named Deb. And she always, it's funny because now she works for Metro Police doing their property stuff. But I told her you were going to be on the show, and she's like, "Oh, I've seen him so many times." So it must have back when you were not chief, but because I think she left St. Paul back then. But I've always had kind of like an admiration for law enforcement. I just always have. I always thought it was a pretty admirable. When I was younger, I caused a lot of trouble. I was kind of a pain in the ass to law enforcement in North Dakota. But one of the things that I've always been so intrigued by, my wife, she's from she's from the East Side, so she's a St. Paul girl. But it just seems like the police in St. Paul are more liked by the community than the police in Minneapolis. And I was just curious, from your perspective, why do you think that is? Why do you think it just feels like because even during the George Floyd protests and riots, it seemed like St. Paul had their stuff locked down a lot better than Minneapolis did. And I get that where it happened and everything, but it just seemed like the people were more down with St. Paul law enforcement than Minneapolis. Why do you think that is?
Well, I'm not going to talk about Minneapolis, but I'll talk about what our unique culture and history in the St. Paul Police Department is, which I just referenced a little while ago, which is why I think it's very important to promote from within. But we really believe in the foundation of everything within our department is built on trust. And every day, it's every officer's job to make deposits into the bank of trust, because we know things are going to go wrong. And when those things go wrong, if we don't have a full bank account out there with goodwill, trusting relationships, making sure that we're connecting with our community at historic levels, that's how we make those friendships. I always tell our officers in the academy of an old story when I was driving around as a younger man in the town I was living in, and somebody cut me off, and I honked the horn, and I kind of shook my fist at him, and I got up next to him, and it happened to be my old football coach, right? And then I felt terrible. And I put my head down, and I was embarrassed and ashamed. But the point of that story is, if you have relationships with people, you don't necessarily have to forgive them for making terrible mistakes, but you give them that benefit of the doubt to at least listen to them and take the time to just have that human interaction and human approach. It really means the world. And even though our officers carry a gun and wear a badge and a uniform, that's a human behind that uniform. So we try to humanize that uniform anytime we possibly can.
Now, again, there's been an obvious spike in homicides in both sides of the river. Minneapolis numbers are much larger than St. Paul. Now, some activists said that the number spiking was under you, and so obviously, as a chief, as a mayor, governor, you guys are usually looked at and blamed. How do you take responsibility for the spike in crime, and then did you manage to keep the numbers lower than that of Minneapolis?
Yeah, as a police chief and as a human being, I take responsibility, and I take it to heart of every crime that happens in the city of St. Paul. Homicide rates are up, and some people will say, well, yes, they're up across the country, but I don't say that because this is St. Paul. And it's my responsibility to keep St. Paul safe, and the buck stops at my desk. Now, some of those homicide rates have gone up, but I'll get back to earlier where all of the spokes of the criminal justice wheel have to work in concert. And a lot of those homicides are people who should have been locked up to begin with, who were out on probation, who had already committed violent felony crimes. And so that's a whole other topic that we could talk about. But I will say,
For real, right?
But across the country, the solve rate on homicides is about 50%. But in St. Paul, it's over 90% the last 3 years.
No way.
Wow.
No, Chief.
Yeah, absolutely.
Your homicide solving rate is at over 90%.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know what's crazy about that is that,
good job.
During all of this defund the police nonsense that was going on, I wanted to try and understand where people were coming from. In general, I think that it's a terrible idea because I came from a life where I was surrounded by criminality. So I understand how these things work, that there's vacuums of power. And, if law enforcement's not there, then some other entity is going to fill the void. And if it's, people from the street, you typically don't want that, right? And so what I heard constantly was, police don't even solve murders, right? Like that's like their job. And they would cite these statistics. And like you said, some big cities have such low solve rates. And I always thought that was a hard comeback, like I would go back to like, well, there's so many different spokes. So for you, do you feel you have, is there anything in your formula? And I don't want you to give away your trade secrets because this might be one of the things you do as your consultation.
As a consultant, right?
What are some things that you feel helped with that? Is it culture? Is it policy to have that high of a solve rate, man?
And let me say, too, before you say this, because I know one of the things where the fact that you hold your officers accountable, that I have mad respect for you, and that's why I've invited you back constantly, because I have so much respect for you, because you hold your officers accountable when they're wrong. And I respect that, and I think that that's one of the reasons why I'm shot up. I just had to say that.
Thank you. I'll address that quick, and then I'll get back to the homicide clearance rates. But, I've always said, and I didn't make this term up, someone else did, but I heard it a long time ago that your people won't listen to you when they're wrong if you don't support them when they're right. And so I've always supported them when they're right, and I have taken decisive action when they're wrong. And sometimes that ruffles feathers, but when our officers do the right thing, I'll back them every day of the week. And when they do wrong and violate the code and tarnish the badge, then I'll take decisive action as well. So I just call balls and strikes like an umpire behind the plate does every day. As far as the homicide rates, we have made a commitment in our department to make sure that we fully staff the homicide unit. The most violent crimes have to take priority. which means over the last few years with officers losing officers and not being funded at the level that I believe we should have been funded at.
Right.
I had to do away with, motors unit, traffic enforcement, other low level crimes that have consequences because crashes go up, etc. But I staffed the violent felony investigative units at full staffing, which allows us to solve those crimes. And it's not rocket science to know that if you solve a homicide, you're probably going to prevent a future homicide, because people commit crimes over and over again until they're caught, unfortunately. Repeat offenders account for most of the crimes that occur in our city.
So, I like hearing that for you, you've kind of alluded to earlier, and I want to come back to it, that there are multiple, spokes in the wheels of justice, right? Like law enforcement interactions is where you're seeing someone breaking the law, catching them in the act, or even, in your case, as you have to do some kind of preventative work, right? Like, building community, things like that. So if you see something that's stepping out of line from a civilian standpoint, that they know, hey, I can call law enforcement or whatever. But you mentioned this, and we actually had a conversation with a Hennepin County attorney candidate talking about how you have some prosecutors, John Choi is one of them in Ramsey County, that has this kind of criminal justice reimagined kind of philosophy about, doing X, Y, and Z types of things to lower law enforcement interactions, but not necessarily decrease the probability of them happening. And so you alluded to it earlier that sometimes on the wheels of justice, if you have people that are getting back out, that it makes your job 10 times harder, right? I just kind of wonder from your perspective, now that you're not chief, what do you say to people that are open to the idea of having this justice reimagined, kind of like, again, John Choi's vision, or Chesa Boudin, who was just recalled out in San Francisco? Is that helpful or hurtful to your profession?
Well, we have to have these conversations about it's not just a prosecutor's office. It's not just the bench. It's the entire wheel, all of the spokes working in concert, everything from the first 9/11 call to the responding officer, to the investigator, presenting a case to the county attorney or city attorney for review and charging. That case goes to the bench. The bench has a job to do, a very important job to do, and we have to get out of this using COVID as a crutch. We need to start making sure we're holding violent offenders accountable. It can't be an either or proposition. What we've observed over the last several years is really a failed experiment of the either or proposition. Defunding the police has been a failed experiment. It hasn't worked. Violence has gone up. We have to continue to work with our community ambassadors, our violence interrupters, our community members who are out there doing a great job preventing when the police have to show up in the first place. But my God, we have to make sure we have enough officers to answer the calls, the 9/11 calls. We have to have enough officers to engage the community at historic levels to build relationships. And we need officers on the back end to investigate those crimes in our crime labs, to process the scenes. All of that takes people. And for the last few years, law enforcement across the country has struggled with people trying to defund the very people who are out there keeping us safe. And you know what, say what you want, but the fact is yes, there are some bad apples from time to time, and I know people make fun of that statement. But we've shown in St. Paul that when we've had bad apples, we throw them right out. And it doesn't happen that often, but when it does, we do it. But again, it's been a failed experiment to defend the police. It hasn't worked. Things are more violent. And as far as the bench goes, we need to make sure, I think what I'd like to do is have a report card for every judge out there on the case that they get, the level of violence that they get, a report card of how they're sentencing these cases. And that accountability is very important. We put out there every traffic stop by our officers based on race, why they stopped them, did they search them, did they pat them down, did they frisk them? So we're very transparent. I think whether you're cops, your prosecutors, or your judges, we should all have the same level of transparency and accountability.
So when we talk about politics, and because your job sometimes it becomes PR, you have to become your own walking PR firm or something. Well, I know you have someone, but you have to deal with the public, right? And so on your way out, right before you retired, there was that little situation with yourself and State Rep John Thompson, and I bring that up because what's a chief's job when they're involved in when a situation comes down like that? No, when you made the statement that he tried to bully the police officers, do you think that that was the right statement to make? Do you think that at that point you were adding fuel to the fire, or what was your intent when you went public with what happened with that situation?
So I came at that situation from as a human being and the leader of the St. Paul Police Department. And the fact of the matter is he did bully those officers. I said it then as police chief, and I'll say it now as a resident. I have watched the video, the body-worn camera video, and it was clear to me what had happened. And again, as I said earlier, right, it's really hard to get people to listen to you when they've made mistakes if you don't back them up when they're right. And so credibility from the top down of our police department, leaders have to do this, and I think we have to do it more when things don't go right and misinformation is out there. The truth has to come out. And again, I will sometimes, as I kind of think about it as a baseball coach. Once in a while, your team's down in the dumps. People are, hammering on them, beating up on them a little bit, giving them a lot of, pushback with doing a difficult job. And so once in a while, that coach has to come out of the dugout and kick up some dust and get that team pumped up to go out there and do the difficult jobs that they have to do. And that's what I did. I would do it again a million times over if that same circumstance was presented to me, because again, our officers have a lot of responsibility, but they're human beings, and human beings deserve to be treated with respect, as I demand our officers to treat other people with respect.
Good.
Sorry.
Good.
So that brings me to the thing about when it comes to black and brown people, we know that sometimes bipolarism, mental illness runs prevalent in our community, and Rep. Thompson said that his daughter was experiencing a mental episode, mental breakdown at that moment. When we're talking about black and brown people, when we talk about the differences, there has to be the cultural differences has to be respected. Those officers have to be respect those differences, right? So it's important, number one, that we have trained officers that can recognize when someone is having mental illness breakdowns, when they're having episodes, and that they're not so forceful during episodes, because doesn't that escalate situations and heighten it and endangers the officer as well as the victim or victims? And then now, knowing that that person is having a mental episode, how do you expect your officers? How do you tell your officers to deal with that? Because again, if Toby's at home, and the mere fact that he's dealing with the situation, he's been fired.
Why you gotta go Toby, bro?
I don't know why. I have no idea why I came in with that name, Buck or something. And he's, and his main situation is that he's unemployed and he's dealing with a wife that's angry with him, and they get into it. She calls the police. The police come, white guys from outside of St. Paul dealing with a black guy. They come in not understanding the culture differences, and the only mere fact that this guy's not intoxicated, but he's having maybe a mental breakdown. How do we have officers deal with that?
Yeah, great question. So we started the mental health co-responder program back in a year after I became chief, 2017. We're very proud of it, partnering up officers with social workers, training all of our officers annually on implicit bias training, de-escalation training, crisis intervention training, recognizing the signs of people in distress. So that's how we approach these situations. And the fact is, you say a white officer showing up to, a black resident's home. And earlier I mentioned we increased our diversity by 41% over the last 6 years. Officers on the scene weren't all white officers. Officers did de-escalate. Officers did treat Mr. Thompson and his family.
He admits it. He said as much. He did say as much. Absolutely. He said those officers, he thanked them because he said he was up here and the officers de-escalated the situation and brought him back down to one. So kudos.
Yeah, I wanted to kind of ask a question. See here. So we have a commenter, Kathy. Thanks for joining the show again, Kathy. I think she was commenting last week or the week before. And this is Kimberly. I don't know why I said Kathy. She asked a question about your views when it comes to gun reform at a federal level. Do you think that there are certain things from just purely a chief of police perspective that you don't like about current gun restrictions, or the opposite? Are you more of like, I want to have more gun restrictions? And this is just really a personal belief. But how do you feel about, I guess, gun reform or gun, I guess, easing when it comes to gun laws?
That's a great question. For many years I have talked about this locally and nationally in DC about just some real common sense gun reform issues. One of the things is the universal background checks. I believe that is a reasonable request to make sure that if you purchase a weapon from a private party or at a gun show, that a background gets conducted. Why would we want a dangerous felon or somebody with a severe mental illness purchasing a gun? That loophole is still there. I believe, again, as someone who has firearms, keeps them locked up safely in a safe, etc. I really think that is just a common sense approach. The red flag laws, again, making sure if we have somebody that's in distress, has made threats, is in a mental distressing situation, we ought to be able to keep those guns safe in a location with another family member. My God, this is just common sense stuff. Those are two examples of things that we really, as a community, whether you're Democrat or Republican, have to be able to get behind and say, just enough is enough. We're better than this, right? It's really frustrating that we can't find some middle ground on some of the real common sense approaches to gun safety.
Because of politics. Chief, the Republicans, a lot of them anyway, will say that doesn't work. Those measures don't work. And I'm in total agreement with you. I think that if we close those small loopholes, it will curtail some of the gun crime that we're having. But they say that doesn't work. Now, again, I'm not in law enforcement. You've been for 40 years. I mean, could you briefly explain why those little measures would work? As a police chief, if those things were enacted, number one, you do believe that they work, and how do you believe that they work? What difference do you think it'll make?
Well, just the sheer numbers of private party purchases out there, we're not going to prevent everything, right? You're always going to have something that slips through the cracks. Somebody gets a hold of a gun, but at a time where somebody is struggling with mental health or they've had a really bad breakup and they don't have a firearm and they go purchase one over the internet, or the list goes on and on.
Or make one.
We may not prevent, right? We may not. Yeah, absolutely. We have the ghost guns out there and the other parts you can buy online, etc. But if we prevent some, isn't that worth it?
Yes.
So
no, excuse me. The chief asked you a question.
Is it worth it? It depends. It depends. So I've always had this interesting dynamic, and a question that I want to be able to ask you. So I am a constitutionalist, and I'm very conservative. And my issue with red flag laws is that I think they can be used as a cudgel to kind of find this gray area where someone could abuse it, right? Like this person, I'm mad at my whatever friend and ex-boyfriend, or they cheated on me, or whatever it might be, right? And that without proper due process, that you could have a situation where, SPD is kicking in your door to take your guns, I'm not, maybe I'm being a little bit hyperbolic saying they're kicking in your door, but they come to take your weapons and you're like, what did I do? And you're like, well, we have some concerns. So that's my issue. And I'm not a person that says like, let's wild, wild west this thing. But I am a person that I'm always on high alert when I hear, well, you can take away someone's due process, even if it's only for a little bit. It's like, well, you still had to give that thing up if something went that way. So, like from your perspective, I know that Ohio recently passed a constitutional carry, right, in that state. And law enforcement, police unions came out in that state and said, we are against this. We think this will make our jobs way harder. It's going to make our officers less safe. And I myself, I know Minnesota is not a constitutional carry state. I do have my permit. And so from your perspective, your law enforcement perspective, are you kind of in that same line that, having these tools you feel are a way that in the hands of good actors that have good intentions can be used in a good way, but what about with bad actors with bad intentions? And that's where I come from.
Yeah, and these are great, great conversations to have in a civil way like we are right now. But yeah, the open, the open carry where anybody can have a carry without a permit is
crazy.
It makes it very difficult for law enforcement.
I know you won't say it, Chief, but I say it damn crazy.
I get it. No, I get it. I mean, maybe you change the duty to inform, that if you do interact with law enforcement, you have a duty to inform if we're going to have open, not open carry, but constitutional carry. But yeah, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, man. I've always been curious because I haven't really found a lot of law enforcement that are yeah, I'm down with that.
Oh yeah, enact laws that make us less safer as cops and as constituents. Hey Chief, look, I know you got to go, but so I got one more question. The most important question: you were Chief for how long? 6 years.
6 years.
6
hey,
years.
My screen is frozen. You can hear me okay?
We hear you just
hear
fine.
You, but yeah, you're right. Your screen is frozen.
Technology, though, it's a great picture of you, though. So don't worry.
I have a Republican hacker that heard red flag, and so they shut down.
Probably. So, Chief, you were Chief for 6 years. Now, when you inherited, okay. So let me ask you this. I guess it's a two-parter. When you inherited the city, was the city in good shape when you inherited? And now, after 6 years, are you leaving this city in the best shape that you could have, and better than you inherited?
Thank you. That's a great question. Every St. Paul police chief that I've ever known, I talked about this during one of my retirement events. And, I think back to the chiefs that I served under, and each one of those chiefs have improved the St. Paul Police Department. And, I feel like I worked as hard as I possibly could, engage the community at historic levels, did quite a bit of reform and hired a very diverse police force reflective of the community we serve, and improved our relationships. So I feel like mission accomplished with what I wanted to do, but the question as to whether the police department is up to the standards that the community expect really is a question that should be asked of the community. And there's been some articles about that out there. But I'm very proud. I'm very proud of the women and men of our department who do an incredibly difficult job every single day. And I do believe that the department has been left in better shape than every chief in the history of our department over the last few decades has served. So that's how I view that.
I had one last question. As I don't know if he was your direct predecessor, but Chief Harrington, was he right before you, or yeah?
I think so.
No, Tom Smith.
So
it's all
right.
6-year terms. So when I became chief, it was Chief McCutcheon up until 1992, and then Chief Finney served from 1992 to 2004. After that, Chief Harrington 2004 to 2010, Chief Smith from 2010 to 16, and then I picked it up in 2016 through last month.
Okay. And so I know that Chief Harrington went on to become, was he the public safety director of Minnesota, right?
Something.
Commissioner, yeah.
Commissioner. So for yourself, do you have any aspirations in that, realm or regard if you got tapped to you know, to be on someone's.
And if you want to run for office, I can help run a campaign. I've only won one or two for some people.
Yeah, well, thank you. You know, right now I don't have aspirations to be a chief or a commissioner of public safety. What I want to do is to give back and help other organizations learn some of the lessons that I've learned over the last 34 years of being a police officer and 6 as chief, and use the recipe of what we have learned in the St. Paul Police Department to help other organizations. We're really excited about that, and if people want to check out our website, it's theaxtellgroup.com.
Say it again, Chief.
It's theaxtellgroup.com.
And we'll make sure to link it both on our podcast page, and also, you know, afterwards we'll go back and put that link in there. Well, we appreciate you taking time out of your busy evening to stop by, have some conversations. We'd love to be able to have another one of these.
Come in person,
in
Chief.
person. It'd
Yeah.
be great, you know, because there's a million other questions I got for you, man.
And another interview sounds like you got to go do already.
Right. That sounds good. I would like, you know, both of you, thank you very much for your time. I really enjoy this, and yes, next time I'll be in person.
Thank you, Chief, man. Take
Thanks,
care, man.
Chief.
All right. Have a good night.
You too, man.
Bye now.
Man, listen, he's a great stand-up guy. I love having the Chief on because he's, you know, he tells it as it is, and what I do like is the part where he holds his officers accountable. Not that Minneapolis is, because I think the expeditious firing of 4 rogue officers was, you know, the upper echelon of what chief's behavior should be when officers engage in misconduct. So I respect Chief Arredondo for that. But this guy here, you know, he does hold his officers accountable. So my thing is like the new chief in Minneapolis, how when the
the search or whatever.
Yeah, well, just the fact that she came right out and defended those officers. The interim. And I thought that just reeked of business as usual. Instead of coming out and saying, you know what, let's do a thorough investigation.
Well, to be fair, like I'm not trying to give this woman anything, but from her perspective, she's interim. She probably wants to have a job, and she
Not
might
like
have
that.
got pressure where she was like,
Not like that. Well, she just probably found herself out of a job, because now you're going to have the public sentiment that, again, smells like the same. Damn, I'm sorry, I'm a little tongue-tied here. The same as usual, right? And so I think that she should. I tell you this all the time with, you know, her and folks like Trump. Set the standard, set the bar high, bro. Come in and do something different, i.e. her. What she should have done, again, come in and say, listen, let's do a thorough investigation. We won't have anybody impeding this. And believe me, my officers were wrong. They will be held accountable. Makes bold statements like that. It reassures us as the public that there can be unimpeded, fair investigation. I mean, you're dealing with what a lot of people, more than the majority of the city, especially the black and brown community, thought was a wrongful death. Right? And so that's a delicate situation, right? That's a tightrope that you got to walk.
I get it, but I'm saying
No, you got to handle it better than what she did. She didn't.
I'm purely looking at
She sucked.
What do you have to lose versus what you have to gain? Was she on the short list to be the next chief of police of Minneapolis?
No.
Nope. And so I'm not privy to any information of how conversations go. I'm just imagining, because I understand how organizations work. I've ran organizations. I've been the chair of organization, and there is a rally around the flag, and there might be people that were like, "Listen, here's what we want you to come on and say." And she might have been like, "I don't want to do this," but they're like, "But listen, you're the interim, and if you screw this up, like, I have a job for you in this place." I'm not even saying that happened. I'm just saying you ain't gonna make bold moves when you're an interim anything, unless you're ready, unless you're just in that YOLO position. You can't. I'm just saying, if she goes above and beyond and does that, more power to her. But what does she have to gain from it other than
you gain public sentiment, and you also gain the fact that now the public says, you know what, that lady has integrity. Let's have her be our chief. Now you have more support for your decision as a mayor to say, I think I did make the right decision, because now you got overwhelming support by the public saying that this is the lady, this is the person that we want to come in after this chief. But again, coming right in and not admitting any wrong.
I didn't like how she did that.
And let me just say too,
I'm just saying.
Speaking to sources close to her,
Yeah.
I do know that there was a bit of pressure, and I also know that the reason they did not want to say those things is because they were worried about lawsuits. So when you start worried about, but you can't because you're gonna get sued anyway.
Yeah.
You already know that.
Yeah.
You already know that, bro. You're gonna get sued anyway. So you don't worry about that. What you do is worry about the public safety, and there has to be PR to
Do
it.
the right thing.
Yeah.
And that's me and you had this conversation last week. I think we had this on live on air. I don't know if we had this off air, but my ultimate perspective with law enforcement is that even though I personally hold them to a higher moral standard, I think that law enforcement in general, going into that profession, I think takes a higher moral character and quantity in general, like compared to the regular population. Like if you go to a business office, a dentist office, let's say, I think that the people that work there, compared to the moral character of average law enforcement is much higher. With that said, I still believe that police officers are servants of the public, and because they're servants of the public, and because they are, if you want to say, actors of the state, they're there to enforce what the state, which is the people, that they have to be held to a higher standard. So I think both of those things are true, that not only do I think that they have a higher moral character, but they need to be held to a higher standard. And just today, I don't know if you watched any of that footage of the hallway footage from the Uvalde school shooting. That, man, those cops, there's 19 of them. They were
Those
like 45
cowardly bastards.
That's what I'm saying, right? Like
They were cowards.
They need to be held to a standard of like holy cow, like it's just crazy, man. That again, you know, I'm the dude that I typically do think that law enforcement deserves to have more accolades poured upon them in general, and I give them the benefit of the doubt 9 out of 10 times. But also, when you see something bad, you have to be like, that was BS, and the fact that they didn't want to do it. Now, we didn't have that kind of in the conversation we want to bring up, but it kind of came to my mind that was just something that was just crazy to me to see, like how, like, because I even heard from some people saying, well, what do you expect them to put their life on the line? Like, yeah. Like,
that's why they have a gun.
If you can't do that,
then you're in the wrong job.
And we can have conversations about how much they're paid and all that stuff. I get all that, but that's probably the other reason why we've had a lot of people leaving, because they maybe felt
they aren't paid enough, right? Well, but again,
now that they feel like they're being asked to put their life on the line more, and they're like, but we don't even feel that. So I think if that's your mindset, you probably should be one of the officers that leaves. You know what I'm saying?
You absolutely should be one of the officers that leaves, because again, if you're a little too afraid to put your life on the line with a gun, when you know that that's the job and the risk you take going into it is different. When you're in a city like Minneapolis, where you know an officer only gets killed once every 40 plus years, I mean, so you're not, of course, at any moment, especially
Something
now,
can
over the
happen,
last 2 years, when you're at 51 murders already and you ended the year with 99, anything can happen, absolutely. But chances are they're shooting at each other than they are officers. And so, again, yes, I expect you to put your life on the line. But here's the thing. You're right, hearing some of those things today when I was watching MSNBC before I left the crib today, knowing how they waited, to me that sent that was fear.
Sure.
Because, and listen, is it easier for me to say with a guy that isn't a police officer? Somewhat. Because I know as a father, as an ex-husband, and so on and so forth, you're a protector. Right?
Yeah.
The first thing you do, of course, when if someone breaks into your home, you get nervous. That's natural. But you also have to think, I have to protect Beth, right?
Yeah.
And my home, and then bam. So your instinct kicks in. You're nervous, but you also kicked in. I'm gonna end this. Well, not necessarily. I'm gonna end this life, but I'm trying to rid myself of the intrusion before the intrusion rids itself of me.
And I will say this in the words of guest and fan of the show, Jai Hansen. It does come down to a breakdown in leadership. There is a point in which I can look at individual officers and say, like, I can't believe that you didn't disobey or disregard this order. But at the same time, there is a chain of command, and the leadership, they're the ones that need to be held to the highest standard. Because, like, what were you doing? How did this breakdown happen? Now, speaking along the lines of putting yourself out on the, in danger or things like that, there was a story that I just saw come up earlier today, that there was a contractor who was doing a job, and his trailer that had all of his tools, like $20,000, got jacked. And if you want to bring this up, this was a wild story, just like reading it, is that this man's trailer gets jacked. He finds out where it was, but police say that the camp is too hostile to immediately retrieve his trailer.
Hey, listen, to go back to what we were just saying. Wait a minute, now if you're a little too afraid, then you should probably go to church. But again, I think you also got to be real and assess the situation. If those encampments, who sometimes can be violent, I've been to some, I don't know if you have, I've been to some in Minneapolis, I've served people, I've talked to them, I've blah, 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 blah. They can be dangerous. They can be extremely dangerous and hostile. So I know what those officers are talking about. And this is what we're talking about. Officers using, what's the word I'm looking for? Using good forethought or something, because you know that this is a heated situation. You know that this is a hostile environment. I don't want to kill anybody. I don't want to have to draw my gun or blah, blah, blah. So I think that officers just, and as the victim, you hate that. You're like, screw it. What? Go get it.
Go get my shit.
Yeah.
Right.
Go get it.
I see it right there.
Or better yet, I'm going to get it. So, you know.
Why don't you back me up?
So, yeah, it's yeah, I get it.
I understand, like, so reading through this, I get it. Like, the man has $20,000 of material. He has insurance that hopefully will cover it, but you're not going to get those items for a minute, so you're out of work. And every day you're out of work, that's money coming out your pocket.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? But here's the thing. It does explain in the story that officers had tried to go in the encampment and they were met with aggression and they got attacked. And the call was made, hey, like, retreat because we're going after property. And if you feel that your de-escalation is not working and it's going to be hostile, the question is, do you go in and crack skulls and have all of the public outrage that's going to happen over that? Or you just say, bro, charge it to the game. I'm sorry. But see, then that's a whole other factor, right? Because if you feel that someone can come just strongman you, and like no one's getting arrested, they're not grabbing your gear, and you can see it, then that's to me the scary part. Because people, everyday average people, ain't going to stand for it. Like, you might try and go the route, like, so I'm going to tell this funny quick story. My brother-in-law, he used my wife's car. And when he was out with his homies, they got into it, and this is like 15 years ago. They got into it, and one homie, like, threw a brick at the car, right? And dented the whole side of it. And it was like, we got an estimate on it, and it was going to be like $1,500, right? So I told my brother-in-law, like, he was so upset. He was like, let's go mess these dudes up. I'm like, nah, we'll hand this to the police. I call St. Paul police. I tell them, I know where the dude lives, right? Like, I got someone that will testify that saw it happen. Like, can you go arrest this person? And the cop literally is like, he said this to me. He said, there was a homicide yesterday. I don't care about your car that got kicked. And I was like, I know where this cat lives. I was like, I'll go handle it myself, but I figured I would come to you first. And he goes, what do you think, this is a movie? He's like, where are you from? Because, you know, I have a North Dakota accent. I'm from North Dakota. He's like, I don't know, maybe you watch too many movies. He's like, you really think you can roll over? You know, he's like, where's it at? And I told him, like, case and something. And he's like, you're going to get hurt. And he's like, and if you go over there, after me telling you, do not go over there, if something happens, you will be charged with the crime. And I was so mad, man. I was like, I read him the riot act, man. I was like, I'm a taxpayer. Even though I didn't live in St. Paul at the time, I lived in Oakdale. I'm like, I'm a taxpayer, blah, blah, blah. You can't treat me this way. He's like, well, if you want to come down, you can make a statement. We'll get on it. And he was just being such a D-bag. Now, I ended up being able to handle it without having to use violence or anything like that. The dude ended up giving money or whatever, you know what I'm saying? I kind of did have to flex on him. And it could have went either way, right? Like, I mean, east side of St. Paul, whatever. But he ended up paying up. But that type of feeling of like, okay, well, you got this stuff and cops ain't going to do nothing. Like, I'm still going to try and handle this on my own because I ain't trying to be punked out.
No, I hear you. I mean, I think,
and that's the negative side that I can see happening.
Well,
man.
no, it is. But I think that again, those are trained officers, and that's what I'm saying. That's why I asked the chief, you know. And I hope that, like, for instance, if Ja gets elected, that for real we go back to retraining these officers. Sometimes you can't teach an old dog new tricks.
Sure.
It also has to be the officer, how willing the officer is to receive that training and accept it, and then dole it out when presented in certain situations. That has to happen. So it doesn't matter how much training you get. It really depends on the officers using those techniques. So, but then if they don't, let's hold them accountable. Let's not come out backing them until we know everything. And then if they deserve to be backed, then let's do just that.
Yeah, no, absolutely, man. Man, it's quick how these episodes be flying by. Like when Todd or Chief Axtell got off, I was like, man, we got a lot of time to kill. But nah, I mean, we're already at
An hour says.
We already had an hour, man.
An hour says quick. You know, okay. Let's spend the last 2 minutes here. Then there was two topics we wanted to talk about. President Biden, our great president. Let me tell you something I heard today too.
Yeah.
So there's a poll out that that Republicans prefer Trump over DeSantis, which is bad news for you guys. And then there's a poll that says that people don't like either Joe Biden at the top of the ticket.
Or Joe Biden or Donald Trump.
Oh, I'm sorry. What did I say?
You said Joe Biden.
It's time to go home. Joe Biden or Donald Trump at the top of the ticket, and the majority of them will stay at home and not vote for either one of them. But then in a head-to-head, they still prefer Joe Biden 2-1.
Which is crazy. But yeah, no. So that story came out today. Here's what I've said to people. I don't know if DeSantis will run. It seems like he's doing all these things where he's going to run. He's raising
and all the shit he did with
like $100 million
does he?
in the bank. For
and then all those things that he did with the
and
he's running.
He's starting to put.
He's running.
I saw a commercial on Instagram.
Now, if Trump was smart, you put your hand underneath his shirt and make him your puppet. No, you know what I'm saying?
Sure.
Because the sentiment says, because I keep trying to tell you, I guarantee you, we can butt 7 steak dinners. Listen, some of those same people come out that voted for him before, but he won't win because he'll make people, he'll dust up everything that folks knew about him for 4 years ago. So DeSantis, if he's smart, you make him, since you're the leader of that party, you go after him.
I think, so here's what it comes down to is that I think enough, because DeSantis earlier said, if Trump runs, of course I'm going to support him, right?
Yeah.
And then things started
So
to kind of
Nikki
shift
Haley.
and change. And I've been hearing a lot from other conservatives that they're like, yeah, just, let's have a good primary, have a good, clean fun. I'm like, we're talking about Donald Trump. Like Donald Trump,
be a primary.
He's ruthless, man. And that's the thing. It'll be interesting.
He's dirty, is what he is.
I do think that poll was interesting. So I think it was, especially people under the age of 30, only like 23% Democrats want Biden to run for re-election. But they say that if Biden was running against Trump, like 92% still said that they'd pick Biden.
Yeah.
And like you said, 8% were like, no, I'd literally
They'll stay at home.
I wouldn't even vote for
So that's what I'm saying. You guys got to think about that, bro. I know you guys want Trump to run, but you got to think about that. So we don't have a choice as Democrats. I mean, he's the incumbent president. He's going to.
Do you think he'll see the tea leaves and be like
our president?
Yeah, Biden.
No incumbent. Come on now. Come on.
Serious.
Do
you think Barack is like, Joe?
No.
I think it's time.
No, and you wouldn't. Absolutely. As an ex-president, you wouldn't. You better not. No, he's the incumbent president. He's the leader of our party. He's a Democrat. You absolutely back him to run. I mean, Donald Trump is 77 years old. So, I mean, old white men run, right?
He'd be 82 at the end of his presidency if Trump got elected, too.
And Ronald Reagan was like Methuselah's age when he got elected. So he was the oldest president. He was the oldest active president we had at the time. So I just think that, look, it'd just be smart if you guys, if he's so strategic, again, I would run DeSantis if I'm him because he would give DeSantis a better chance of winning because you put your base, your money all behind. All that I am as Trump, I put behind DeSantis, and I think that that's a winning ticket, especially because here's the other thing. If former Vice President Pence runs, then that does muddy up the water for and you guys' part because now you got some of these guys that never Trumpers or conservatives, or excuse me, or moderates, conservatives. They're gonna probably pick Pence. I wouldn't. I don't know what's wrong with you, but they're gonna probably go for Pence.
The only people that would pick Pence, you want to know who would pick Pence? It'd be
his family,
basically the old. The Bush people, and like the Hogans of the world,
but then again, but I'm saying again though, when you look at the number, speaking of tea leaves, when the number says don't run Trump, you can't be that arrogant to run anyway.
Yeah, but see, Trump
do your party a favor.
Trump is still the Republican kingmaker, where if he wants it,
he's a leader of the party. I don't know about a kingmaker because his last 5 candidates lost.
In the total, but in the totality. He's had far more of his people win than haven't. So he still he's not like at a 90% clip or anything, but he's still batting like 650 or something like that. But
just because you guys are fucking deranged.
Because he's the most recent president. So you're telling me that if Joe Biden, let's say he lost fair and square, You're telling
Which
me that
won't
he
happen.
still wouldn't have any power? if he
Absolutely.
wanted to keep it?
Every
Of course
president
he-
does.
Yeah.
Every president does. I think that, but it depends on how the president. This is the first guy that I think that says, okay, I'm going to take it to the next level. And I think that that's the difference. Most presidents, former presidents, just go away and be quiet and let that other president do their job. But Donald Trump is just the opposite. Partly because of who he was before.
Well, that, but also because of how he truly feels about how the 2020 election went.
Well, you lost fair and square.
Sure.
So
sure.
it's time to
I'm
stop.
Saying, but he
it
doesn't
stops-
feel that.
Well, it's time. Well, then, bruh, it's time to folks to stop whispering that crap in his ear, and it's time for them to say, "Look, you lost. You got killed by." So you got killed by 7 million votes.
Yeah.
Where's the widespread fraud on 7 million votes? If you lose by 300 votes, 200 votes, then I'm
Well, like
shaking
I
my
said,
head. But
I
7
think-
million?
I think no matter what, it's hard to disprove something. But the point is that I agree that Trump, his approach, I think he had a bad calculation. I don't think that it has helped him at all.
No.
I think that the smartest play for him would have been to focus on
Making
all
that
the
party
things
bigger.
that made the improprieties happen without saying what he said. Because here's at the end of the day what has happened, and this is my biggest fear. My biggest fear is that a bunch of Republicans don't show out in 2022 because they think the system is rigged. And that's my biggest fear, man.
You sound just like me. That's the other thing. That it exactly. I said that could bite Trump in the ass, and it will, because how do you turn around and say, no, go vote? I mean, it's rigged sometimes, but it's not rigged when I run.
Yeah, it's
exactly.
Hard, it's hard, dude.
Because
it's hard.
that has. I've listened to, watched HBO specials. I got to show them to you too, bro. Yes, a lot of right wingers and those, what do you call those? Proud people, whatever folks, not just the Proud Boys, but those crazies, they really do believe that the system is rigged, and so I'm not voting.
Yeah.
Well, what if Trump votes? Then maybe.
I still think it's a small percentage because even
It is, bro. There's always fraud, bro. I mean, we're talking about
saying, though,
0.9.
People that feel that it's like fruitless.
I don't
endeavor.
know.
Because for instance, at the state convention, there was we were going to use clickers.
You told me, that's right.
And some people are like,
No.
some people are like, these clickers are using Dominion voting software. Like literally, people are, but it ended up not. Again, of the delegates, the 2,400 delegates, I want to say there's maybe like 300 that were like dead set against it. Now again,
But that's a lot. I mean, out of 2,000 people, but
yeah, that's a lot. How it translates, and that's my fear. So my fear is that maybe, and I've seen some Republicans doing this, that they've been pushing hard to put the election laws back where they were before COVID. And in some cases, it's not going to be the thing, and that's been my biggest fear. You already know that, like the first 2016, I didn't support Trump. 2020, I was a fervent Trump supporter, and I still think that he would do a far better job in a second term because he would truly go in and drain the swamp. Like I think that he wanted to, but then when he got in, he realized like,
dude, he's too full of himself.
This is like so.
Stop playing. He will never get over himself.
So
you think he really said that and then made no attempts to drain the swamp? What attempts did he make? We don't even have time. We do not even have time.
But here's the deal. I personally think that DeSantis has better qualities as a well-rounded leader from a Republican conservative standpoint of how to get things done than Trump, but DeSantis won't drain the swamp. So I'm torn.
Trump didn't either, so that makes him equal.
I know, but he definitely, think about, if Trump gets in, think about the demons he is going to exercise on the federal government.
No, what he's going to do if he was to be elected, he would come in wielding all of his vendettas and grudges. That's exactly who he is, and that's exactly
what I'm
he
saying.
do.
He drained the whole
No,
swamp.
that isn't draining the swamp. That is causing more confusion because you would come in there creating. Listen, he didn't do that when he was in there. He didn't have the intent.
No.
He didn't have the intent to do that.
John Bolton.
Well, but guess what? I think bringing Bolton in at first, we all thought that was so crazy. But again, that was someone in the room that had a clear level head that was telling the president, no, you shouldn't do this. No, we shouldn't do that. But then because he wasn't going along with that craziness, he's the crazy one.
But I'm saying Bolton.
He was already crazy.
Bolton has been in his establishment the whole 9 yards. Like, did you hear what he said the other day?
No.
Man, he basically said yesterday that he doesn't believe that Trump was trying to commit a coup because and he said this on Tapper's show. He said, because I myself have been part of implementing and planning coups in other
And
countries.
this didn't look like
he
it,
said,
huh?
He said, but I will say that he was trying to get people to go to the Capitol and gum up the system. So it was just my point, though, and I know we got to get going here, but point is that that's where I'm torn between, is that I think DeSantis would be a better Republican executive than Trump.
I agree.
In doing a lot of things, but he's not going to drain the swamp, and I kind of really want to see the swamp be drained.
Nobody's going to drain the swamp, Republican or Democrat. That's just bullshit. That's just a campaign ploy. And then let me say this: you're absolutely right, though. But I think that if DeSantis would be a better executive. I think you guys would be better served too. You'd have a better chance of beating. I think he'd have a better chance of beating Biden.
Oh, for sure he would.
Than
for sure, because he doesn't have all
Trump.
that same negative national baggage.
Because people want both Republicans and they want someone serious in the room, and they want to get things done.
Yeah.
They want people just are tired of the rhetoric. I don't care. You've heard it. Both. Yeah. They just want to get things done, and we're so tired of partisanship. So stop being such hacks and let's get some things done.
I also want to again shout out Dennis Smith, again, sponsor of this show. He really does believe in our mission of helping bring civility back to political conversations. If you have any questions about wills, healthcare directives, trusts, or even help with your small business, make sure to give Dennis a call at 612-889-3971. Shoot him an email, dennis@smithlawmn.com. Make sure to swing by the Weber Mart.
The Weber Mart.
Thirsty. And also make sure to please hit our link tree. Hit that Patreon button that's going to allow you to become a subscriber to our show. Connect with us on all of our socials. And if you like this show, make sure to like it and hit that share button.
Absolutely.
I'm AK Kamara.
I'm Jamar.
Peace.
Check you out next week.